Hello, Kim Strother, and welcome to the Tick Bootcamp podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we're really excited to have you, Kim. We always like to have New Yorkers on our podcast. For some reason, we don't find many New Yorkers, but we appreciate someone who speaks like us on the podcast. So thank you for joining us.
Anytime, I'll try to really hit my New York accent for you.
Thank you. So, Kim, why don't you first introduce your business to the folks who are listening to this podcast?
Of course, I'm a personal trainer, a holistic health coach, and a yoga instructor. I have my own business where I work one-on-one with clients. I also have a nutrition program that is paleo based, which we can get more into as it's one of the biggest healing tools I have through Lyme. And I teach events, I teach retreats, and I'm also an instructor on the Melissa Wood Health app.
So what is the name of your business, Kim?
It's really just my name. It's just me.
Right.
That's it. I don't have anything else for you.
All right.
It's this is it.
So you're a New York City-based professional. Are you from New York originally?
I'm from New Jersey originally, so outside of Atlantic City, which is a completely different accent that I dropped a long time ago and I will not bring back.
All right. So a Jersey gal now living in New York City.
Exactly.
So talk to us about what it was like growing up in New Jersey. As you know, New Jersey is actually one of the three highest Lyme disease states in the U.S.
Mhm.
What was it like growing up in New York? And specifically, were you aware of ticks and tick diseases during your childhood?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up outside of Atlantic City in on the river, but however, a little further inland, we had a Christmas tree farm. So I grew up with lots of ticks on myself, my brother, my father. My father actually had Lyme as well at one point, but he had the bullseye rash, was put on antibiotics. He also had a multitude of other health issues, so it's really unclear if he ever really got better. It was a little too hard to tell with his health. So, but yeah, very aware of ticks. My mom was also deathly afraid of bugs. So my mom would often freak out when we would have ticks on us, take us to her best friend's house, and her best friend would pull them off of us. So very well aware of ticks. And certainly, growing up in New Jersey, we were outside and in the woods, riding our bikes, jumping off a bridge into the water on a rowboat. We were, just living our best outdoor life in South Jersey.
Yeah, so of course you're living close to the river, which means there's a lot of moisture, which of course is not good for us, but is good for ticks, right?
Mhm.
And tell me a little bit more about the Christmas tree farm. Was this your family farm, or was this something in close proximity to where you lived?
No, it was our family's farm. So when my father was growing up, it was a chicken farm. And then before I was born, they turned the farm into a Christmas tree farm, which is really only lucrative one time a year. But we had a Christmas tree farm. And so, my dad was on the farm every day, cutting trees and mowing grass and doing all the things. So very much in close proximity to lots of ticks all the time. And then same thing, we were on the farm riding four-wheelers and golf carts and playing tag in the trees with not a care in the world, and then would covered in ticks in the summertime.
So what precautions were you taking, or were your parents encouraging you to take so that you wouldn't have ticks on you? Were you using,
I
any?
don't know that there was precaution then in the 90s, or I don't think we really did. I think we knew that it wasn't great to have them on us, and you tried to avoid it. But I don't think as children, I don't think there was enough information then as there is now about ticks. And we were just kids in the woods and playing and having the best time. And then oftentimes would have ticks on us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So when your mom would take you to the neighbor to have the ticks removed because she was so creeped out by the ticks she couldn't pull them off her own children,
correct.
were there any other prophylactic steps that were taken after the ticks were removed from you
Never.
so that you wouldn't get sick?
No, that
Oh,
never ever happened, which is so crazy to think looking back. But I just don't think we knew. We didn't have the education around it. Lyme, like, yes, I knew what Lyme was because my dad had the bullseye rash at one point and went to the doctor and had Lyme disease. and got antibiotics, and that was my knowledge of Lyme.
So how old were you when your dad was diagnosed with at least acute Lyme disease?
That's a really tough question that I don't have the answer to. I don't remember, but probably, I don't know, maybe around 10 or so, but I don't really
But
remember. And that's probably a mix of a lot of things why my memory is not
right, no,
so great.
but of course it's a childhood memory, right? And childhood memories do sort of float in and float out. But during your childhood, your
Yeah.
dad was sick, and Lyme disease was the diagnosis that he had received.
Hmm.
So talk to us a little bit more about you during your childhood. What kinds of things were you working on and dreaming about? I mean, how do you think as a child and as a young adult, how do you think you were going to be serving the world?
Yeah. So I loved sports. I was a very active child that my parents didn't really know how to deal with. So my mom stuck me in gymnastics, into any kind of like fun mile run. She would put me in to basically get the energy out of me. And I fell in love with sports at such a young age, and truly was always like trying to share it with other people. And granted, my household was a little hectic growing up with my parents. And so for me, moving my body was such a savior. It was my safe place. It was my way to get out of the house and deal with what was going on in that chaos, to get out and drop into my body and to play sports. And I just knew that I felt better when I did that. And so, even at a young age in middle school, I started a walking program, and I was coaching tumbling to cheerleaders and, younger girls in gymnastics, because I just loved it. And I actually knew at a really young age I wanted to be a gym teacher. And I was a phys ed major in college. I did drop out, but I was a phys ed major in college. And funny enough, in high school, one of my gym teachers and health coaches, he used to call me Kimmer, which I hated. However, he used to tell me all the time, dream bigger. Like, dream bigger, like, don't just be a gym teacher. And I used to be so upset by that, because I loved it. And I don't think necessarily at such a young age that I had the ability to really understand what was happening for me, that it wasn't about working out or playing a sport, but that really I felt so much better mentally by moving my body, and what it was, exercise was doing for me. I just knew that I felt like I had this secret, that if I did these things, if I was walking, if I was running, or doing any kind of physical activity, I felt so good, and I wanted to share it with other people. And I guess, again, being young, I didn't really know what any of that meant. And certainly now, looking back, I understand a lot more about taking
Yes.
care of ourselves. But yeah, so from a very young age, I really always knew that it was something in this field. I just could have never imagined it would be what it is today.
All right. So your teacher is saying think bigger, Kimmer, even though you like to be called
Yeah,
Kimmer. And
exactly.
although that was troubling to you, it certainly planted a seed in your head that there may be some opportunities for you to serve the world in some place other than in a traditional
Mhm.
middle school, high school gym teacher role, and that
Yeah.
there might be a place where you're going to be called to serve. So let's
Hmm.
talk about what that journey was like. You said you did go to college. You began as a phys ed major, but for some reason you didn't feel called to complete that there was something missing there. And as a result of that being something missing there, you took a different path. So talk to us about what college was like, and why you came to the conclusion that your bucket wasn't being filled in that traditional phys ed box.
Yeah. And first, let me say this. I think gym teachers are so important and informative for our youth. And so, even though my teacher at the time kept telling me to dream bigger, I actually think, and truly, I loved my gym teachers, and I'm so grateful for all of them. So I think they are truly necessary and needed and doing great work. So I just
Well,
want to
well,
make sure that that's
let,
noted.
well, let me challenge you there, Kim.
Sure.
I might disagree with that. And the reason
Okay.
I disagree with that is because one of the challenges I think we all have with the traditional education system is that there is a curriculum that is established by some folks that are supposed to, I guess, give us the basics that we would need to live a healthy life. But unfortunately, that curriculum doesn't give us the tools we need to live a healthy life, right?
Right.
I'm a really educated guy. I'm a doctor of law, and I didn't know how my brain worked. I didn't know how my body worked. In fact, it wasn't until I started doing this podcast, despite being an athlete myself and
Hmm.
always being interested in fitness, that I really learned how my body and my brain work, despite being one of the most educated people in our community. So I don't think our educational system is particularly good. It doesn't mean there aren't good people with good intentions serving as phys ed teachers, but I think when you start to put very strict limitations on the curriculum that they must teach, very few of us walk out with the tools we need to know how to operate this body we've been given, right? And again, despite having all these wonderful gym teachers you had and living in a tick-endemic community, they were also teaching you health, and you knew nothing about Lyme disease, right? So
Yeah, I don't know.
let's
I feel like that's an unfair statement. I don't know if we have enough time to like debate that, but I think if we go back to education as a whole, I can tell you that what I learned in biology, I do not apply to my daily life now, or math. And I don't know that in South Jersey, I was getting the best education. I don't speak another language. Like there are so many things that I think we failed in the United States in our education system. It is wildly upsetting to me that gym is amongst the first things to get cut. And while, yes, I think there is a curriculum that we are being fed, especially growing up here, it's so. I think there are, like you said, there are great people. Maybe not everyone got them. And certainly my algebra teacher was not a great teacher, and my gym teacher was. So maybe I was lucky. But also, if we look at our medical system and what our doctors are learning, and then versus functional medicine, a doctor, a real doctor at a great hospital nutritionally is going to tell you to eat white bread and cottage cheese. So I think it's just such an unfair statement to like hone in on just gym teachers or the
oh no, no,
curriculum
no.
not being bad,
I'm
not
not
being great.
no,
But
Kim, let me just clarify my
okay,
argument.
because all the gym
They
teachers are going to come after you, Rich.
No, they can come. Like they can come because I want them to come with the rest of their colleagues, because I would say they all suck, not just the gym teachers. They all suck. Our
I
education
mean,
system
truly, our
sucks.
education system, that is, again, I don't think it's for this podcast, but we can go there if you want. Game on. You got New Yorkers and a New Jersey girl in the room. We can go at it.
But it seems to me, Jersey Gal, that you learned during the course of your college education that there was a place for you to go that was going to allow you to serve differently and better and at a higher level if you
No, I
move
think that
out of the.
you just really thought something special for me, and that was not the case. I like where your head was, but that was not at all what happened to me. In college, at 19 years old, I was on a cheerleading scholarship. I went to Hofstra University, which I could have never afforded without being a gymnast, who I was recruited onto a competitive team because I could tumble. We had no money growing up. There was no way I could have afforded Hofstra. I went there on scholarship. My sophomore year, I had to have knee surgery. And because cheerleading at that time was not looked at as, a D1 sport, they would not give me my cheerleading scholarship my sophomore year. I had to leave Hofstra because I couldn't afford it. I went to a state school in North Jersey, Montclair State University. And honestly, it wasn't for me. I was living in a quad room with girls in a sorority. I didn't drink. I was not a partier. I didn't understand sorority life. It was very much a commuter school, and I hated it. And I lived in the city between my sophomore and junior year of college. And I started fitness modeling at the time. I was taking acting classes. I was waiting tables. I was cleaning apartments. I was going home on the weekends to clean office buildings with my mom. And school wasn't for me. It just wasn't for me. I did not have the attention span for school. So I wish I could say in a poetic world that like I realized there was something bigger or I could be more of service. But at 19, that wasn't it for me.
Well, look,
I just felt like my French class was doing me no justice because I didn't really get it in high school because it was a shitty education. And I dropped out and I moved into New York. I got my certification through the National Academy of Sports Medicine. I started training at 3 great gyms here in the city and ended up fitness modeling. You know, I was working at a gym where the editor of Fitness Magazine went, training Victoria's Secret and Sports Illustrated models, and she would see me and I could do a pull-up and I could do a push-up and I could do a squat. And I luckily started modeling and started doing fitness modeling because I actually could do the exercises that they were normally hiring girls who were 5'10" and stick skinny to do, but they couldn't physically do them. And so at a time when fitness modeling wasn't what it is now, I started working in all of the magazines, and that's the beginning of my New York career. But that was my college experience in a nutshell for you.
well, but Kim, whether we realize it at the time or not, when the universe has something else in store for us, the universe takes us where it's going to take us. And
For
even
sure.
if that moment you didn't realize it, in retrospect, we can realize it together now. So I think even though the two of us like to have a little bit of a back and forth together, we really agree more than we disagree. So
Yeah.
I'm going to take the position, even if you want to disagree with me, that the universe had a bigger place for you, Kim. Like your high school gym teacher, there was a bigger place for you, and your path was not to be a traditionally educated gym teacher. It was going to be something else, right? And
Yeah.
and as you started moving into the fitness arena and you started learning more about how to use your God-given athletic ability to train yourself, and there were some opportunities that you were given to work in the entertainment industry. That wasn't it either, was it, Kim? There was something even bigger for Kim, despite her not believing that was the case when she was a high school kid, right? So talk to us about
Yeah.
when did you start getting sick, and how did that interfere with your ability to pursue your dreams?
Yes. So I started, well, if we're going all the way back when I was 8, I was hospitalized with what would have been every symptom of Lyme, except for it was misdiagnosed. And I believe they told my mom they thought I had Giardia. Uh, and so I was pumped with antibiotics, steroids, was hospitalized for about 2 weeks, and then sent home. I had bouts through high school and college of extreme fatigue. Oftentimes doctors would say to my mom that I was doing too many sports, that's why I was so tired, or blood work did come back that I was iron deficient. Certainly I stopped eating meat at a really young age and then didn't eat meat for 16 years. So lots of times that was what doctors would point to about my fatigue, like, oh, well, she's not eating meat, that's why she's tired. But I would have these weird bouts that would be anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 weeks or 2 months of not really feeling well. And again, I was running track and doing competitive cheerleading or doing multiple sports. And so it kind of was one of those things where, again, we thought what the doctor said was correct. Oh, I must be overworking out, or maybe it's because I'm not eating meat and I will take these iron supplements, and then it would kind of go away. And we never really put more thought into that. And then into my 20s, I was having a multitude of things happening. I was having really awful migraines. I was having terrible GI issues. I was having multiple ovarian cyst rupture and putting me in the ER. I was really tired. I had a chronic upper respiratory and sinus infection. I had rashes up my torso. So I had all of these things happening, and I was treating them all separately. So I was going to a neurologist for my migraines. I was going to a GI for my stomach. I was going to the gynecologist for the ovarian cyst rupture. I was treating everything separately, and I had no one doctor that ever talked to the other doctor to kind of put all the pieces to the puzzle. And certainly if I went to a general care doctor, because at the time I had to have a referral to go to a specialist, oftentimes we would do blood work. And one consistent thing that would come back was that my white blood cell count was really low. And so oftentimes leukemia would get tossed out to me because I had an infection, basically a chronic infection in my system at all times. And so I had doctors starting to tell me things, anything from, and maybe it was leukemia to I was crazy and it was in my head. And I could go on for hours of all the different things all the different doctors would say, but the one common thing they often would do was give me a prescription for something, prescription migraine medicine, prescription, medicine for IBS that then got pulled from the market because it was killing people. And then I was given antidepressants because maybe that would help my stomach issues, or being pumped with antibiotics and steroids to get rid of the chronic sinus infection and upper respiratory infection. And certainly there was a period in that process where I did reach a point by, 28 to 30 was the worst. And during that time, I did go on antidepressants electively because I thought, well, maybe I did create this. And maybe this sickness is in my head because no one could figure it out. And then I went on antidepressants for 6 months and was still really sick. And maybe it helped because I think from 28 to 30, there was a time where I felt like no one understood. I felt like I was also fitness modeling at the time and was supposed to be this picture of health, and was in magazines with, things above me that was like, more energy now. And I'm doing a backflip. And I was dying on the inside. And I had my modeling agents telling me that I looked terrible and that I probably went out the night before, but really I had slept for 12, 13 hours and just felt awful. So I think the antidepressants helped for a little while. And then after 6 months of being on them, I was like, okay, but I'm still really sick. I still have all the other symptoms. I'm still getting pumped with antibiotics and steroids. Like something is wrong here. And so I feel like I just really went on a tangent, but
well, it was a great tangent. So I have two follow-ups to
sure.
your description. The first follow-up is let's talk about I've already told you I think the educational system sucks. Let's talk about the medical system, which I think also sucks.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that really sucks about our medical system is that we have too many specialties. We don't have a person who sort of takes an approach where they're looking at the whole person, where we have neurologists looking at our brain issues or our neurological issues, and we have a rheumatologist that's looking at our arthritic issues, and we have our OBGYN, gynecologist taking so
yeah. I was seeing infectious disease doctors. I mean, you name it, I saw them.
So, we're sort of like dying the death of specialties because nobody stepped back and said, hey, you sound limey, or hey, all these things are connected, and let's see if we can find that which is connected, this multi-systemic presentation, right? That's what was going on with you.
Correct.
And you grew up in Tick-Endemic, New Jersey. You're living in Tick-Endemic, New York. You're a stone's throw away from where Lyme disease had been named and discovered in Lyme, Connecticut. So totally. It's not like these medical professionals were not aware of or should not have been aware of, possibly tying all these symptoms together into a single diagnosis, yet no one did.
No, and I think what was one of the most disappointing experiences as well is that I ended up seeing a doctor in the city that actually did treat for Lyme and is kind of known as a Lyme doctor and office, and knew that I grew up in New Jersey, knew that I grew up on a farm, knew that I would go to the Hamptons and would run, and never tested me for Lyme. Now he started treating me for yeast overgrowth, for candida, for leaky gut. At the time, I had been seeing an ear, nose, and throat doctor and was constantly being pumped with antibiotics and steroids to the point that I had yeast coating my sinus cavity. So they decided to basically treat me for candida during that process. And again, I didn't know where else to go. And he was kind of the best and thinking a little outside of the box as opposed to all of the just run of the mill Western medicine doctors. And so I was staying there. And to be honest, I went on a date. I went on a date. I was nursing a glass of wine at the time because I was trying to be like nice on the date. And
Well, that's a good thing.
I was on antibiotics listening to this guy talk, and he basically told me that he was 40 and single because he had Lyme disease and he lost his 30s to Lyme.
Wow.
And I was like, well, what do you mean by that? And again, I'd heard of Lyme. My dad had Lyme. Like I knew what Lyme was, but I didn't know enough about it. So he started to share his journey with Lyme. And as I was listening to him, I was like, oh my God, like you're telling me my exact life right now. Like this is what's happening to me. And again, I'm on a first date, so I like didn't feel too inclined to tell him that I had yeast coating my sinus cavity or that my stomach was swollen like a bowling ball, or I didn't really want to dive into all these things that were happening. But he got enough out of me that he finally said, you have to tell your doctor to test you for Lyme. And sure enough, the next day I called my doctor and forced them to get me the IGeneX test, took took the test and came back with 3 co-infections. And so if it wasn't for this date, I really would have never, who knows how long it would have taken, but it was hearing someone else's story and journey that changed the trajectory of my health and my healing. And again, like I think that's to me why I share what I've gone through, because unfortunately, I think we really have to figure out our own health a lot of times and really listen to our intuition and to our body to really get the answers that we need. We know when something's wrong. And even though someone in a white coat is telling you you're crazy and you're in your head, you're right. We know our bodies.
We do, Kim, and we certainly want to encourage folks in this community to listen to their onboard diagnostic system and not allow other people, even those who are wearing white coats, to dissuade you from listening to your onboard diagnostic system. But one of the things I do want to share with you is that your experience is, quite frankly, a typical experience, at least on this podcast.
Yeah,
More times than not, people are diagnosed in the supermarket, and that's actually I have to give credit to Phyllis Bedford, who calls Lyme disease the supermarket diagnostic disease, where you're more likely to be diagnosed in the supermarket than you are in your doctor's office, right?
right,
So your story is a very common story, which is unfortunate, right? That all of these doctors in some of the, I'm sure, best hospitals in the world
right.
were in a position where they could have diagnosed you and no one else did, but over wine with on a date you get diagnosed, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about one more piece of your story, and that is the modeling element of your story. We've
Mhm.
interviewed several other models and entertainers on this podcast, and one of the things that harkens, that my brain is harkening to is we interviewed this very, very successful British model named Amanda Milley. And she shared with us that the modeling industry is a rigorous industry. It's
Mhm.
an industry that isn't very easy on your brain and on your body, and some of the inputs that you receive in many cases causes you to make what might not be the most healthy set of decisions when it comes to some of the lifestyle decisions and some of the dietary decisions that at least she had felt that she couldn't escape. Was that a part of your journey? Do you think that the modeling element and the entertainment element of your journey was immunosuppressive and may have caused your disease to become more chronic?
No, I don't think that's been my case at all. And while I can see how someone else could feel that way, and certainly I know the modeling industry well, I was in a different category. I was a fitness model, and so and granted I was also a personal trainer and working out, but I was working because I was working out, and I was kind of this like healthy model. I wasn't the 5'10", had to be a certain size. I was lucky in the fact that my body being the way that it was I didn't really have to change anything, if that makes sense. So I think the hardest thing for me was that when I did get really sick and I did look really tired and my eyes were sunken in, and there was a pressure to look a certain way. There was a pressure to kind of be on and look healthy, like I was taking care of myself. And granted, my agents thought I was going out at night and partying, and meaning granted that was very much available here in my 20s in New York, but like when I got sick, I was not doing that yet. I didn't look well. I certainly lost a lot of weight when I was really sick. And interestingly enough, I can remember thinking at one point, like, oh, wow, this will be great. Like, I'm actually like smaller now. Like maybe I'll work more because I'm skinnier. And it really was not the case for me. It almost backfired. And to be honest, I really stopped working when I was my most sick and started losing clients and losing jobs because I I didn't look well. Like I did. And again, I was a healthy body type. And I kind of hate when they say that like healthy is such a weird word, but it was like I was muscular and I was kind of this picture of health. And when I lost 15 pounds from my frame that I have now, I looked thick. And so I really stopped modeling at that time.
So talk to us about how you were able to perform when you were working out as you were getting sicker. What impact was the illness having on your ability to work out and to retain your muscle mass?
Yeah. So I stopped working out. I went from doing triathlons and working out, and I was teaching jump rope classes and hit classes and doing strength training and training for triathlons. And I went from doing that to absolutely not working out, being completely exhausted. But certainly I had to pay my bills. So I went to a job and would push through, and I don't know what it is not to work. Like I've been working since I was 11, and so to me it was like, okay, it doesn't matter how I feel, I need to show up to get the paycheck. And so that's what I did. And oftentimes when I was really sick, if I had a modeling job, I would go see this one doctor who was an ear, nose, and throat doctor. And granted, I would have this upper respiratory and sinus infection, and he would give me a shot of steroids, a prednisone tapered dose, oral dose, and he'd give me a Z pack, and he'd pack my nose and stick this weird like vacuum machine up my nose. And to be honest, I would skip out of his office. I was like, felt great on the steroids that he injected into my body and like vacuumed out my sinus cavity. And it would kind of get me through the job in the next day or two, whenever it was. And so that became, unfortunately, a weird kind of crutch that I had, is that if I knew I had a big job to do, then I would go see him and I would feel better. Better enough to do
Okay.
the job. Yeah.
So let's talk about Matt is going to take you through the post-diagnostic element of your journey, but I just want to focus on one more piece of the diagnostic piece of it. So you're going to all these doctors, you're vacillating back and forth between believing you're physically ill versus having emotional issues. You're taking mental health medications, and you finally now have an answer, right? You have something that ties all of these seemingly desperate symptoms, both physical and emotional symptoms, together. So how did you feel initially after you received the results of your IGeneX test?
Yeah, when I finally got the diagnosis, honestly, I was happy. I felt like I wasn't crazy, that all of these things for all of these years made sense. And that I finally had this diagnosis. And I thought for a very short period of time that meant there was a plan. And that meant there was this, I'm sure there's a pill that I can take that's going to get rid of this thing and I'm going to feel better and have my life back. And then I realized very quickly that that plan didn't really work. And that pill that I took for 9 months made me feel 10 times worse. And there was not like a linear healing path. But at first, I was excited because I honestly, it's not even excited. Like, I think I cried because I was like, wow, like I'm not crazy. And I think that was the biggest thing. And I still feel that way. You know, I'm happy that I got that diagnosis. And I similarly had an experience only like 2 years ago with endometriosis. And again, finding out that, again, hearing that there was a name to the symptoms I was having, and then I wasn't being gaslit by a doctor, and that there was something like real and tangible going on. Like, I cried, and I remember that doctor 2 years ago was like, "Oh my God, what's wrong?" And I was like, I don't think anybody understands until you're chronically ill what it means to be validated, for someone to understand what you've been through, and like, and you just don't feel crazy and alone. So
That
that's
is
a
cool,
huge
right?
piece. Yeah.
Some of our past guests have suggested that there was another element to the euphoria of the initial diagnosis, and that is not only do they feel validated and they now have answers to so many open questions that they've had to live with, in your case, since you're 8 years old, right? So
Right.
you had 22 years of open questions. But what about the social issues, if any, that developed during the course of that time for you? Were there some folks who didn't understand why you couldn't be the person maybe you had been or they wanted you to be? And did this diagnosis give you the opportunity to now revisit some of those folks and to give them an explanation about why perhaps you weren't able to be at your best at times?
Yeah. You know, at the time, I remember even slightly before I had Lyme, certainly my lifestyle changed, right? I stopped going out, and granted, again, 20s, New York City, like I was out all the time. Um, and I did drink in my 20s and in New York. And so I think when I stopped going out, I stopped drinking, I did have a shift in the friends I was hanging out with, because I don't think people thought, like, if I went out and I didn't drink, I wasn't fun anymore. Um, and certainly I was saying no to a lot of things because I didn't have the energy to do it. And I also think, I'm sure I was like also a bit of a people pleaser. So I went from always saying yes and always showing up and putting other people first, essentially, over how I was feeling, to then actually taking care of myself and listening to my body. And it's interesting that, you know, not everybody likes that when you start to have boundaries for yourself. And so I will say I'm very lucky, and I have a great group of core girlfriends, and they stayed. You know, they stayed, and maybe they didn't understand, not all of them, but they didn't go anywhere. And so that was great. And the people that did kind of fall to the side, I just kind of look at it as one of those things that they just weren't meant to be in my life for, you know, the next chapter.
So, Kim, I want to follow up with something you and Rich were talking about before we get into your diagnosis and treatment, because being a personal trainer and being so
Mhm.
fit and working out so often, I had a similar experience where I was relying on exercise to stay healthy. And, you know, when I got sick and I wasn't able to exercise anymore, I think it just hit me as a double whammy because I was sick, but I also lost the ability to exercise, which I believe strengthened my immune system and also created endorphins and allowed me to be happier, right? So
Yeah.
it was harder to accept the fact that I was sick and I lost the outlet to bring me that psychological relief through endorphins through a run. So did you experience that? And if so, how did you handle it? And what advice would you give to people that may be going through that right now?
Yeah, I absolutely experienced that. And I mean, it's a really tough one. And I did feel depressed, and I certainly mourned the life that I had and thought that I should have. And granted, sports and being active was my life. And so it was really hard for me to deal with. I think the biggest shift for me in dealing with that honestly was reading Louise Hay's book, You Can Heal Your Life, and changing my thought process, because I do really feel, and I say this with so much like caution and care, because I feel like certainly off the cuff, people would say like, you need to change your thought process, or you need to change the way that, you know, you're talking to yourself. And I, being from New Jersey, wanted to be like, fuck you. You don't know how I feel. And it's terrible. And, you know, so sorry, the New Jersey comes out. And so I do say this with, in the most like delicate way, but reading that book reframed it to me, because I was in a victim mindset. I was thinking, why did this happen to me? How did this happen to me? Like, why am I going through this? And I got really stuck in feeling sorry for myself and feeling awful that I couldn't work out anymore and I had no energy and I was constantly sick, and it was killing me, honestly. Like, and I share this, and it's such a dark thing to share, but I had nights where I would pray that I didn't wake up in the morning, and I would be like, you know what, God, save someone else, like save someone that has cancer and wants to live, because I can't live like this. And reading Louise Hay's book changed my life. Like, made me realize like how I was speaking to myself. And I started doing mirror work. I started having a gratitude list every morning. And there were days where that gratitude list was so challenging. And I would really have to be like, I'm thankful for my dog that's next to me, or I'm thankful the sun is out today, or I'm thankful there's a roof over my head, or that I can, you know, that I do have a paycheck coming in. And then, but it didn't, even in the beginning of that gratitude list, my brain would fight it. My brain would fight that, like, that those were my gratitude lists, that those little things that like I should have had this better life, or I should be feeling better. And I just kept pushing through and kept sticking with that mirror work and affirmations and gratitude. And I started meditating, and I actually started to look at, like, asking to what I could do with this, like how, like, that this didn't happen to me, that it happened for me, and having that reframe. And I think, and again, I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know it when I was 30, and I didn't know it when I was the most sick. But looking back at 42, and looking back at me, sorry, when I was that sick, like, it changed how I work with people. It changed my ability to listen to people. It changed, you know, I want to help other people. And if I can help one person shorten their journey with Lyme or autoimmune or any other health issue, then like that's why I went through what I went through, is to be able to help other people. And again, there are so many people suffering with so many illnesses, and not to discredit how anybody feels, because I know, but like, I think there's so much power in taking back our health and looking at, not, you know, why me, but you know, how can I reframe this? How can I treat myself better or differently? And doing those like daily practices of gratitude, being mindful of the way you're speaking to yourself, and really looking at, you know, what this means and how you can help other people through the process.
So, Kim, and there's science behind that, right? So that's, well, I guess let me start with your approach that you use when working with others. You know, from your website and from our pre-interview questionnaire that we gave you, you focus on fitness, nutrition, and mindfulness. So we touched on fitness a little bit. You just touched on mindfulness, but the mindfulness approach really is not just think it away, because so many people get triggered in our community. It's not all in your head. However, reframing how you think and putting conscious effort into a mindfulness approach will balance your nervous system, and it will actually cause chemical changes in your body to help you heal. That's science, right? That's not saying it's fake. You are sick. You do have an infection. You do have a plethora of microbes in your body, but mindfulness will help you overcome that battle. That's an important note. But we will get to nutrition in a little bit, but I just want to circle back to the fitness before we get into your diagnosis and treatment, because the fitness component, we talked about how we kind of depend on those endorphins and how fitness can help us also strengthen our immune system, which could help potentially fight off infections like Lyme, which may be why from the time you were 8 to 30, you were really managing it and your body was fighting as best as could until it couldn't when you were 28 to 30 when it really hit you hard, right? But
Right.
what are your thoughts from a fitness standpoint of the concept of over exercising? Because we've had other fitness, leaders in the community like Gina Vales and some others on this podcast that say over exercising is a real thing. And if you over
Right.
exercise and you don't handle it appropriately, it'll actually weaken your immune system rather than strengthening it. So what are your views on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Also, guys, I'm realizing I'm in the dark now. Should I turn on some lights?
It's very appropriate for the day after Halloween. So that's
I'm into
yes.
it. It's spooky. I
Yep.
could turn on some lights.
So
It's
Matt,
up to you.
while Kim is turning on some lights in
I'll
the
turn them
background,
on.
I'd like to visit with our folks some of what you were talking about with the brain, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's important to understand what thoughts are and to have a conversation what thoughts are, right? Because we are often in a position where when we're talking to folks in the Lyme community and they're told they have to think differently, they get triggered. And of course,
Totally.
getting triggered puts you into fight or flight, which is immunosuppressive, right? But I think the bigger challenge, going back to a little bit of a debate that our Jersey gal and I were having earlier about the educational system sucking, is
Right.
one of the things that the educational system does not teach us is what a thought is and how a thought occurs and how part of what we have to do is learn how to utilize our body and to help our body heal and how to utilize our brain and the different elements of the way our brain presents, right? Because psychologically, the way our brain manifests is that our beliefs trigger our thoughts trigger our feelings trigger our actions give us our results, and our results reinforce our beliefs, right? So a thought, as you pointed out, Matt, is something that is an energetic or an electrical stimulus that goes through neural pathways, which then trigger feelings, right? And
Yeah.
we don't know what a thought is. We don't know how to define what a thought is. So when somebody's telling you, hey, you have to think differently. Well, since we don't know what thoughts are and we don't know how they're triggered and we don't know what impact it's having on what we manifest, of course it's triggering because we don't know how to do it, and nobody trains us on how to do it, and nobody trains us on what it is because our educational system sucks. But with that being said, what I think what was so beautiful about what you and Kim were talking about is that what Kim was doing is she was discovering different tools that allowed her to change the neural pathways that were not serving her. For example, she was engaging in a gratitude practice. And what the gratitude practice was doing is it was changing these neural pathways that were not serving her. And that was happening. Her thoughts were changing, right? As she was going through incantations and she was changing her neural pathways, then her thoughts were changing, right? So there are physiological things that we can do to change our neural pathways that will then change the way we think, which will then put us in a position where our thoughts will no longer trigger feelings which are not serving us and allow us to take actions that are going to be helpful to us. So I think it's really important for all of us. And since we had a moment to pause, I did rejoin the conversation. But it is really important to recognize that there are very particular steps and paths that you can take so that you can actually change the neural pathways, which are going to change the thoughts so that your thoughts can serve you rather than hurt you.
Yeah. And I really can't recommend enough Louise Hay's book, You Can Heal Your Life. I think she just puts it in such a beautiful and non-triggering way. And again, I was triggered by plenty of people that told me that. And I did say what I said earlier to them. And so I think that book really puts it in a beautiful way that can help you see things differently and start to implement that work that will, again, like anything, just like working out, it is a muscle. Our brain is a muscle, and retraining us to think differently, to speak differently to ourselves, it takes time. And again, in the beginning, I fought it. I would like not even believe myself as I was saying some of these things, but pushing through it, feeling uncomfortable. And even if you don't believe it, keep going until you do, and you will.
Yeah, and I do some weird things. Like people say, if you smile, it'll actually change the way you think. And it's true,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, I do things sometimes if I catch myself with my nervous system being stimulated, and I tell people this all the time on the podcast, I will hum in my car super loud. And it's, it's like, what is that guy doing? Right. But I mean, humming, deep breathing exercises, there's a ton of things we can do. So I think all these things are real. And if people just try them, they'll see the results from them. Right. But
Right.
let's go back to the fitness component. If you can just address the over-exercising question. If you want me to repeat that, Kim, or is that still fresh in your head?
No, I feel like it's still fresh.
Okay.
And I feel like I absolutely did over-exercise. There was definitely a period of my life that I was a runner and I was obsessed. And I probably was over-exercising and the cortisol was through the roof and it wasn't helping, right? And I think also through this process, granted, there was a period where I really couldn't do anything, but I think, and again, it's how I approach training now. It's with myself and with other people, is really listening to my body, encouraging people to listen to their body and doing what feels best to them. Now, my workouts now compared to, in my 20s, I was doing triathlons and I was doing really heavy weights and running for miles and swimming and cycling and teaching jump rope and doing all these things. And now I do hot yoga. And I don't run anymore. I walk on an incline on a treadmill, or I get outside for a hike. And if I have a day that I don't feel good, I absolutely take off. If I have 2 days in a row that I don't feel well, I will take off. I really honor and listen to my body now. And I didn't do that for such a long time. And so I do think overworking out really is a real thing. And I definitely, have clients sometimes that do come to me, and it is really interesting because the clients I have that come to me that are kind of in that overworkout category actually are the most challenging clients to get to dial back, right? Where I have other people that come to me with other goals in mind, and we're changing diet and exercise, and maybe they're moving more, but it's actually getting people to do less is the harder thing to work with, because it is such a real thing. And certainly we get that endorphin rush, but overall, especially with that cortisol spike, can be detrimental in the long run. And so I really encourage slowing down, listening to our body. And if you are a person that does love to run, or you do love a HIIT class, do that if it feels good, but make sure to give your body enough rest, balance it out with, trying to mix in a yoga class and slowing down a bit too. And I promise your body will still love you and you will still have the results that you want.
Well, I love that advice, Kim. So we're going to probably touch on that a little bit more, but I do want to now go back to your diagnosis. So your date pushes you to get tested for Lyme. You have to fight with your doctors. You get an IGeneX test. You said you tested positive for 3 co-infections. Was it Lyme and 3 co-infections? And can you tell us what those co-infections were?
Sure. My Lyme was actually inconclusive. And I had Babesia, Bartonella, and Rocky Mountain spotted fever.
Got it. So, I mean, you had some serious tick-borne illnesses there, right?
Yeah, just a couple.
So, who did your doctor tell you how serious these tick-borne illnesses could be, especially considering how late stage you were with these infections?
No. So that doctor put me on doxycycline for 9 months. And so I took high dose of doxy for 9 months straight. I kept having to come off of doxy and go on antifungals. So I would come off, I'd go on antifungals for a week. So I was taking nystatin at one point, daily for a week, or diflucan, but then diflucan stopped working altogether, or fluconazole, however, whatever name you want to call it. And then I'd go back on the doxy, and I did this for 9 months, was feeling terrible, was also at the time, I was doing colonics that somehow they would help kind of alleviate this awful heavy brain fog. I was trying to go to saunas. I was kind of trying to do some alternative things. And then finally I ended up switching doctors. Found a different doctor, Dr. Frank Littman, who is a functional medicine doctor here in the city. And it was Dr. Littman that actually, to be honest, I think one of the best things about Dr. Littman is that he listens. Like that first initial consultation with him, he listened to me and really listened to my entire journey, which was long, and all of the test results and all of the symptoms, all of the things. And the first thing he did was take me off of doxycycline. He put me on a candida protocol. He put me on a natural supplement instead of an antifungal. He put me on, it's called monolaurin. It's coconut derived, which is like a natural antifungal. And so he put me on monolaurin instead of putting me on a prescription. And then he basically told me I could only have green vegetables and protein. And at the time, I did not eat meat for 16 years. And I told him I did not eat meat. And he said, well, you're either going to be really hungry, only having green vegetables, or you'll start eating protein. And I was so sick at that point that I was willing to try anything. So I had a filet mignon that night and never looked back.
Can I pose you there, Kim?
Like, what's that?
Can I pose you there? I'm sorry. So many questions before you go on. Okay.
Sure.
The first thing is, and I completely agree, and I think so many people listening to this podcast would relate, that your first doctor didn't probably learn your story well enough, either A, because he didn't care enough, or B, because he didn't know enough, right? And the problem I see there is you described already just on this podcast that you were on antibiotics and on steroids pre-diagnosis. The antibiotics didn't really do anything, and the steroids gave you this temporary false hope that you were cured, but it was really just the Band-Aid of the steroids. And when they wore off, it was back to the way it was, right? But more importantly, steroids will weaken your immune system. You have all these microbes. You're sick for 22 years, probably with Lyme, maybe even longer, right? From 8 to 30. Right. Your immune system's compromised. You have a pool of microbes, and now they put you on 9 months of doxycycline. That's not going to help chronic Lyme disease and co-infections, right? No. So now the candida is growing, and candida overgrowth is going to also make it less likely for you to overcome any kind of microbe, because it's weakening your body, it's compromising your immune system, and it's adding an additional burden to your system, right? So all these things together, I'm already seeing like, oh no, right? Then I didn't hear much of detox in in those 9 months you described. You said you did colonics. That's the one thing that popped out, where the colonics helped. And I think that's because it may have been helping you detox your body. Correct. That gave you some relief because you needed to properly detox. The prehab component before treatment was missing. You didn't have the ability to assist your body in, functioning properly as you were killing off things with the antibiotics. And now the antibiotics weren't getting deep enough to kill the microbes that you had deep into your body, but they were probably killing off other things in your body, and you couldn't properly remove them through detox protocols. Like, is that a good assessment of where you're at? Because I just feel like, unfortunately, 100%. The doctor didn't do well by any means, and I don't like him.
Right. No, same. And it's wild because he treats people for Lyme. So
even more scary.
I know.
So thank God you decide to leave and you see this next doctor, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it was very wise to start with this supplement to help your candida overgrowth, right? Because that's really important before you start to do even more. So the monolaurin is a very common supplement to use in lieu of prescriptions for, candida overgrowth. And that's very common, again, with Lyme patients, right? And tick-borne illness patients. So then the green vegetable and protein thing is really interesting, because we have some people come on and say, hey, I can't tolerate vegetables. And there's varying reasons why, and everybody's different, right? Are you more inflammatory? Are you more, mast cell activation syndrome-y, right? Those things matter when it comes to your diet. And I know you personally are very much bio-individual. I mean, anybody who knows you and has read up on you, your entire thing is everybody's different, and I want to work with you to figure out what works best for you. So clearly you had a good path there. But the protein's interesting, because we had so many people tell us, a paleo lifestyle change your life, right? Hey, I was a vegetarian, then I started eating meat, and then I became I went to the paleo diet, or that was really needed in order for me to be able to overcome that hump that I couldn't get past in my healing journey. So I want to learn more about the protein component and the green vegetables and how key that was in your healing journey, because it sounds like you're doing nothing but antifungals and diet changes. Is that true?
No, there was more than that. And I will say too, because at the time I remember I was looking at a clinic that I couldn't afford, but I was looking at it, and it was in West Palm Beach, and it was a Lyme clinic, and it was actually vegan. And so again, I think it's figuring out what works for your body, because clearly that place has great reviews and works really well for some people. So I do like to say that, again, go figure out what works for your body. At the time when I had, Dr. Littman put me on this candida protocol, I and I tried green vegetables and protein. And I will say I am a human that too many vegetables are hard for my stomach because I also struggle with chronic SIBO. And that's like a whole nother conversation. But Dr. Littman also put me on an array of supplements. I wish I could remember all the things he put me on. I was also getting a glutathione IV twice a week. I was also still keeping up with infrared sauna, colonics. I was doing ozone steam baths to really, again, help with the detox. I was dry brushing at home to just, again, help my body and my lymphatic system move and work. So I was doing a lot of those things. I will say I also went to Vancouver Island and I found a guy in Vancouver Island. His name is Stuart Gross. Honestly, I don't know if he's still practicing, but he had this, he did electromagnetic acupuncture testing. And I will never forget, I came with my little manila envelope and I had all of my test results from all the things, all my Lyme symptoms. And I didn't show it to him because I really wanted to see if what this machine was going to do was going to be accurate. And it was really wild that he was able to really tell me all the things that were going on from this electromagnetic acupuncture test. And then I was a believer. But Stuart also had me sitting in front of this infrared, like little light machine that I did. It is now actually, it was called the Wave One by Free Medica.
Free Medica,
yes.
yes.
Yes, it's a different name now. They have a different name, right? Other than Wave One.
It's Wave 1, Wave 2, and the Nikki.
The Nikki, right, is the newer one. Yeah, so I actually sat in front of Wave One before it was Wave One. So I was sitting in front of the original machine and I had to wear like little glasses to block out the light. And I would truly sit in front of this machine like every single night. So I had Free Medica before it was Free Medica. So I was doing that as well. So I was doing a multitude of things. There was a lot happening. So it is a little hard for me to pinpoint like, oh, this was it. And I don't think there is one it. I think it was a collection of things. I do really give credit to the Candida diet, which again is now why I continue to stay consistent with living a paleo lifestyle, just keeping inflammation at bay and taking out sugar, dairy, and greens. I just feel so much better. But that, after 2 weeks of doing a hardcore Candida diet, I felt like I could think again. I mean, granted, I definitely plateaued, but it was so crazy to me and also so eye-opening that what I was putting in my body, and I essentially ate healthy as a vegetarian, right? And was personal training. Like I thought I was.
But Kim, define healthy, right? Because it's so different for everybody. Just because you're eating vegetables and you're eating a veggie diet doesn't mean that's healthy. I can tell you, if I don't have protein and I don't eat ground meat and I don't eat chicken, my body will yell at me. Even if I'm having smoothies and protein powder and my body, like I know how my body is and it'll yell at me and tell me, you got to eat some ground beef, right? Like, and I need that. And everybody's different,
Correct. And this was my 20-year-old self thinking in my 20s when I was like, I am healthy because I'm doing triathlons and I'm eating a vegetarian diet. Like I should be healthy. Of course, now at 42, I don't agree with that statement. But at the time, I thought that. And it was eye-opening to me. And again, I think it really changed the course of how I work with clients because I very much was this, I was a trainer and you lifted weights and you did cardio and, and again, granted, I had clients that also ate protein then, and I had clients that were vegetarian, but I thought I knew, this kind of one size fits all mentality to being healthy or to wellness or to working out. And again, going through this process changed my life, changed my opinion, and changed the course of how I work with other people.
So a few comments here. We actually had the founder of Free Medica on our podcast, Stephen Davis.
Amazing.
And we talk all about the Wave 1, the Wave 2, and the Nikki. So that's episode 360 for anybody listening who wants to learn more. It was a really fun, fascinating podcast. The other piece is we've had other nutritionists and doctors come on and say people that have gone through the chronic Lyme experience generally need more protein in their diet. And I find that true. And it sounds like you found that true as well, Kim, where I just have to get a tremendous amount of protein. And I do have protein bars sometimes, and I do protein drinks. And then I do a ton of natural protein between chicken and ground beef and other things, like I said, even peanuts. Some people can't handle peanuts. I can, right? But again, you have to figure out what your body can handle and what it responds well to, and then implement that into your diet based on how you feel after eating those things. So certain types of protein I can't handle, right? But certain other types of protein bars I can, depending on if it's plant-based, right? Or if it's whey-based, or if it's milk-based, or whatever, those kind of things.
Right.
So I think that's very bio-individual as well. But I think everybody listening to this podcast should be sure they're getting enough protein in their diet one way or another. And just because it's a green vegetable doesn't mean you're going to feel well when you have that, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Candida is really important, I think, because we've learned from so many of these specialists and doctors that you can't overcome Lyme and the microbes if you have other things keeping you unwell. So whether it's mold, whether it's Candida, whether it's whatever, right? Those things are going to prevent you from getting better. So what is the Candida diet? Can you give us more detail? Because I think our listeners are going to want to learn more about that and understand what that looks like to help reduce, the amount of Candida in their gut and potentially also address SIBO, right? Because that's something that a lot of us deal with.
Yeah. A few things here too is, and working with Dr. Littman, certainly the other things he did, because like you mentioned, Candida was a huge piece to the puzzle. He sent me to a different specialist and I found out I had parasites. He had me do the SIBO breath test. We found out that I had SIBO. We did, a different test. I had mold, high mercury. So I had all the things. And so Dr. Littman really kind of peeled the onion, and we started from the bottom and started addressing all of these other issues so that I could really heal the Lyme, because I had so many things happening in my body that there was no way, and which is why being pumped with doxycycline never worked, and then actually just was contributing to the Candida overgrowth. So just throwing that out there as well.
And Doxy doesn't address Babesia as well. So that's another thing that blows my mind. You have Babesia and it's giving you Doxy and nothing else, but Babesia is a parasite that's not addressed by an antibiotic like Doxy. So that's just, sorry, I had to just get that out there.
No, of course. Yes. So that was happening. And so the Candida diet, so Dr. Littman truly told me I could only have green vegetables and protein. And any protein I wanted, but it had to be clean. There's no sauce, there's no sugar, nothing on it. So I could have steak, I could have chicken, I could have turkey, I could have lamb, whatever protein, I could have fish, of course, encouraged, grass-fed, organic, wild caught, all of that. But basically he was like, have at it, have all the protein you want and only green vegetables, so that I wasn't having like a sugary, starchy vegetable. That's where I started. And it was really challenging, to be honest. As I started to feel better, and again, I did it because I was so sick that I was willing to do anything. But there was certainly maybe I got a sheet of paper at the office with a list of all the green vegetables and a list of protein. But outside of that, there was nothing else, because it wasn't like I could have, I was allowed to have grass-fed butter or ghee. So I think that's how I cooked things. However, as I started to feel better and as I started to kind of add things back in as I was feeling better, honestly, this website still exists. It's called the Candida Diet, thecandidadiet.com. It was kind of my roadmap to, again, starting to implement other foods, but staying in that paleo wheelhouse, but then, adding in other veggies, eventually adding in berries because they don't spike your blood sugar, adding in some sweet potatoes, adding in quinoa. And now I will say, where it's kind of my maintenance, I also have a nutrition program, and it is a paleo-based program. And I will say, and again, if you are really sick and you did really have Candida overgrowth, I would say go hardcore first. My nutrition program now has a mix of things, which are the things that I love that makes being paleo so much easier nowadays. Like I love Siete. They make, cassava flour and almond flour wraps. They make chips that are also grain-free. I love Primal Kitchen, makes condiments, ketchup, mayonnaise, salad dressings that don't have sugar, don't have dairy in them. So my nutrition course also gives you all of these options so that you don't feel so restricted and so limited that it is a sustainable lifestyle. However, again, if you were super sick and you really had bad candida overgrowth like I did, I would kind of say start where I started, which was green vegetables and protein. Try it for 3 months, and then you start adding things in. And certainly, you know, the candidadiet.com was a great source of information and knowledge to learn what it's like to kind of cut all of those things out.
Kim, that's thecandidadiet.com. I'm sorry, thecandidadiet.com, I believe, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yep, I'm looking
it.
at it now. It looks wonderful. So
It's great.
thecandidadiet.com, and I'll link to it in the show notes. So, and then also the general concept between a paleo diet is Paleolithic diet, right? Caveman diet. Focus on whole, unprocessed foods. You want to avoid modern processed foods and agricultural products, and you want to emulate the diet of a hunter-gatherer, right? And I think that's the key there, because all this processed food, all these artificial fillers, all of these things that are just modified are so bad for us and create intestinal inflammation, which is what most Lyme patients have. And they create, you know, a compromised immune system, like all these high sugar foods, right? So it's sort of back to the basics. And I think that's just a good rule of thumb in general.
Yeah. Also, Whole30 is another great program to start with, especially because it's those exact principles. So again, if you're looking for recipes, Google Whole30 recipes, or do Whole30's program. That's another great one as a reset.
So I have a question for you, because you did touch on that Dr. Frank Littman. He actually gave you some supplements to treat the Lyme, but they were probably more herbal based to actually kill off the microbes, correct? Or did I misunderstand that earlier?
No, he had me on supplements. And again, I couldn't remember if we tried what I was on, but he was really just boosting my immune system. And then again, Stuart Gross, who's in Vancouver Island, that essentially had me sitting in front of the light machine. Stuart had me on homeopathic remedies and tinctures, and also had me on different supplements.
Got it. And did that come after Dr. Littman, right? So you were treating with Dr. Littman, and then you went to Stuart.
You know, it was kind of at the same time.
Okay. Well, I'm just trying to build a picture in my head here, right? Because I had a false belief, or at least I had an opinion that has now changed, where you can't address Lyme and co-infections unless you actually do a pretty solid kill protocol, right? And, you know, a lot of doctors like Dr. Marty Ross, and Rich loves this because he slapped me around in a very fun way in the interview, said to me, Matt, you don't have to sometimes actually treat the Lyme. And I think in your case, I'm wondering if this is what actually happened, because you did quickly touch on earlier that you had it was Babesia, Racumans, spotted fever, and what was the other one? I'm sorry.
Bartonella.
And Bart, right? So you had Babesia, Racumans, spotted fever, and Bartonella, but then you had definitive parasites, SIBO, right, which is Candida. You had literally fungus in your sinuses. You had mold toxicity. You had heavy metal toxicity, mercury. All these things prevent you from getting better. Our immune systems always win the day. And Dr. Rolls told us that, right? The immune system wins the day and helps you become healthy, but it cannot if you have all these other things going on. So by addressing everything I just described with the infrared sauna, the glutathione IVs, all of your supplements, your colonics, your ozone steam treatments, your dry brushing, right? The diet, your high protein diet, your green vegetables, all of that, I feel like stripped away all the other things weakening your body, and possibly your immune system fought back and went hard at all of the infections that needed to be eradicated from your body. I mean, how do you think of that?
I think that's right. And I want to say this too, because I think sometimes people come to me and they're like, oh, you cured your Lyme disease. And I don't really agree with that statement, because I feel like kind of one of those things that's there. If I get too stressed, if I am traveling too much, if I fall off and eat too many things, like I was in Europe this summer and I went for it. I had chocolate croissants, and I had pasta, and I had cheese, and I enjoyed it. And then at like the 10-day mark, I was like, who do you think you are? But I told myself, I'm in Europe. I'll be fine. I can handle this. And then I started to feel like shit. And I was like, damn it. But what's so crazy, 3 days, I like went to the store. I got grass-fed butter. I got coconut oil. I did my bulletproof style coffee in the morning. I fasted intermittent fast, and I went back to super strict in 3 days. I felt like I could think again. It's just a small miracle, and they're small wins. But all to say this is that I feel like the lifestyle I live now keeps me feeling well. But I certainly have moments where I feel like I have this flare up. And I don't know, is that something I'm going to live with for the rest of my life? I don't know. It feels that way.
But
But
let me comment on that though, right? Because what you just said, I think, is really important that I want to stress for everybody listening to this podcast. And I want to come back to what you're saying though, as far as like, these little flares that can pop up, right? Because the first thing I want to address before we get into that deeper is you went to Europe, you ate bad, you said, heck, I'm on vacation. I'm gonna go to town, right? And you're like, oh no, like 8 to 10 days in, you're like, I feel it. But within 3 days, you rebounded because you had all of these tools and all of this knowledge that allowed you to say, oh crap, I know what's going on. I know what to do. And you did those things, and within a few days, you were back, right? And I think all of us can relate to the fact that sometimes we have this irrational fear where it's like, oh no, I'm going to get as sick as I was for as long as I was. And that fear is so bad for us from a nervous system standpoint, from an immune system standpoint, from just a general mental health standpoint, a happiness standpoint. And we have to realize that we aren't where we were. And even if we do, because we're human, we do make bad decisions. We have the ability to implement those practices to rebound. Now, I'm not saying people should do those things, but it's people, it's going to happen. I think the first thing I want to really stress is people should not live in fear of a relapse, right? They should not live in fear of a flare, because if it happens, we can get ourselves out of it. We have the doctors, we have the team, we have the tools, we have all the things we can do even on our own sometimes, right? Just to rebound like you described, Kim. So I just want to make sure that's a really important topic, because for me, that was a hard one to really understand as I got later on in my journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course I have that. I always say it's like post-traumatic stress when you start to feel those symptoms come back and you think like, oh my God, like it's back.
Yes.
But again, it's like I have the tools, and that's where I do 98% of the time do all the things. I keep to the paleo lifestyle. I move in a way that feels good to my body. I meditate. I practice all the things I preach. But again, I am human from time to time, and I'll over travel or I indulge on a vacation, and then but I know how to get back to baseline. I know how to get back there now, and it takes a couple days, but it's my roadmap to maintaining how I feel. And certainly if I get off track, I know where to come back to.
So now let's debate a little bit about the topic you were just discussing, which is you feel like that you are going to have flares, and is this something you have to live with the rest of your life? I understand that thought, and I can totally relate to that thought, but I'll tell you where I've evolved to and where I am right now. And I want you to just debate with me and challenge me a little bit, because I want to learn and grow from this with you.
Matt.
So I understand that. And then sometimes I think, oh my goodness, I ate a bad lunch and now I feel inflamed, or I wake up the next morning and I go, oh man, that Lyme is never going to go away. But then I reflect and I really think about it. I go, I went to lunch with a 28-year-old young man who ate like crap. And then he's telling me like I'm falling asleep at my desk, or, oh my goodness, I can't work out tonight. So how much of that is just normal human being stuff that we are attributing to Lyme disease? Because our bodies were not designed to eat all that food that we get served at a restaurant, or all that craziness, right? So if you go out and you eat bad, well, is that just normal human body reactions to, an excess of carbs, or an excess of sugar, or an excess of food that we shouldn't be eating, right? Or again, bio-individuality, where my body doesn't respond well to dairy and I ate a ton of dairy and now I feel like crap. That's normal. Right. So is it Lyme, or is that just, something Rich doesn't have Lyme and he can relate to that, those types of things, right?
Of course. And I absolutely agree with you. And I will say that, so interestingly enough, I'm just going to give it to you. So I had endometriosis surgery last November. Had endometriosis surgery, really intense surgery. And after my endo surgery, I felt like my Lyme was back. I felt super exhausted. And of course, I started to panic. And there's like a weird shame that comes with Lyme for me, because I'm like, again, based on my Instagram, you would think I'm the picture of fucking health. And so again, the New Jersey comes out, sorry. But it's like, I'm the picture of health. How can I, preach this healthy lifestyle and I feel terrible? And so then there's this like weird shame spiral that happens with it. And I'm doing all the things, right? I'm eating paleo. I'm I don't drink alcohol. I'm, meditating daily. I move my body. I mean, granted, post surgery, I really couldn't move for a while. So sure. But like, I'm doing all these things. Like, how is this happening? And then of course I start to look at, wow, like I just had this traumatic event on my body. Did it trigger the Lyme again? Also, my hormones are out of whack now because I'm 42 and I'm kind of in perimenopause. And then I start to, and then my SIBO was back, not to mention, I did a SIBO test shortly before my surgery. It came back positive, which of course I knew. And then and by the way, just fun fact for people that have SIBO, SIBO has a totally different diet. It's called the FODMAP diet, FODMAP, different than the Candida diet. So if you have SIBO, you want to, granted, if you follow a Candida protocol or a paleo protocol, you really cut out most of the SIBO food, but there are other triggering foods if you have SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So, avocado, which would be paleo, actually bothers SIBO. So that's just something to look into if you have SIBO, that look at the FODMAP diet. And again, you might feel overwhelmed because we just threw a lot at you with all this information, but take your time, read it, digest it, see what resonates, try it, see if you feel better. Okay, going back. But so I ended up so I did my surgery November 30th. And then in January, I went on Xifaxan, which is an antibiotic specifically for SIBO. I felt so terrible on Xifaxan for the 2 weeks. Couldn't wait to get off of it. I felt like I was dying the whole 2 weeks. And then I got off of it and I really noticed no difference. My stomach was still really bloated. I felt like my SIBO still was there. I felt like the Xifaxan did not address it. And I was taking supplements that my doctor put me on that were supposed to, like help the Xifaxan work better. And it was super disappointing. And again, I felt like, oh my God, is this my Lyme? Is it Lyme? Is it my SIBO? Is it hormones? Do I have mold again? So what did I do? I ended up IGeneX made a new at-home test that's a finger prick that you can do. I'm forgetting the name of it. I could probably find it somewhere in my apartment. However, I did that because I was like, my Lyme is back. It came back negative. It's not back. So that was a plus. And I started, going back to my FODMAP protocol. I did do a mold test literally 2 weeks ago. I'm waiting for the results. So I have these moments sometimes where, I'm glad I ruled out the Lyme piece, but I often wonder, like, having Lyme undiagnosed for so many years and my immune system being a bit on the weaker side, certainly my gut, I think from years and years and years of antibiotics and steroids, I struggle with gut issues. I struggle with SIBO, which of course ties all the way back to just my immune system in general. And now hormones as a 42-year-old woman play a part in this sphere of things. And so, yeah, it's a bit of an ongoing journey, if you will. And I certainly will get triggered by it. But I take a bit of a different approach to it. I did do the test, right? I did do a mold test a few weeks, like literally 2 weeks ago. But I also had a leak in my apartment and I was like, maybe there's mold now. And so I try to take it one step at a time. I try not to get overwhelmed by it. I do my best to take it one day at a time to, do the things I know that make me feel my best. Again, sticking to my FODMAP protocol, and I love avocado, but right now I'm not having it. And really, again, going back to the basics, going back to what I know, makes me feel better. And I feel I would like to feel better sometimes than I do, but for the most part, in comparison to where I felt when I was 28 to 30, I'm a completely different human being.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be so hard on yourself because, there's a couple of factors here, right? And I think, again, we're all bio-individually different. So I love Dr. Jill Carnahan. She was one of my favorite doctor interviews we ever had on the podcast. And she brilliantly described how some of us just have smaller toxic buckets, right? And what does that mean? Rich can handle 20 toxins and
Right.
not be impacted with his health. If
Right.
Matt had those 20 toxins in his body, he would be crippled because we're all different, right? And all that means is
Right.
I have to be more mindful of my exposure and do better to minimize that so I don't get sick. It doesn't mean I can't live a well and happy and healthy life. It just means my tolerance is not as high as Rich's, right?
Right.
And there's reasons behind that. And it's there's so many reasons, right? Whether it's genetics, whether it's stress levels, whether it's exposure, right? But the other part of it, you have to think about all of the antibiotic overuse. I can tell you growing up, I mean, the pink medicine, right? It was antibiotics and you drink it, it tastes like bubble gum. How many antibiotics did I take my whole life? And then before I got sick, and then when I got sick, and they just pump you up with all these antibiotics. But what is that doing? It's carpet bombing your gut microbiome. Your gut microbiome is what keeps you healthy. And when you carpet bomb the good and the good are what keep things in balance and make you more. And now if you get rid of those with all the antibiotic overuse, you're making yourself more vulnerable in the future to things too. So we understand that. We don't understand how complex it is. We understand that at a basic level. So we have to just take steps to identify what could be contributing. And you are so educated and so smart, right? When it comes to all these things you just described with mold and SIBO and Candida and Lyme, you're doing all the testing, you're doing all the diet stuff. You will be able to continue to live a healthy and happy life because of the knowledge you have, and you're going to make sure you keep doing all the right things, right? So I think that's the attitude we have to have. And we're all different, right? Rich is taller than I am. I'm shorter than Rich. Rich has a potentially bigger toxic bucket than I do. All right. So I have to be a little more mindful, right? I think that's how we have to approach this whole thing we call chronic Lyme disease.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I have to ask you, because I'm fascinated with the whole diet concept. I mean, you work with so many people, but in the subset of people you work with in the Lyme arena, what is the diet you find most helpful for chronic Lyme patients? Like, just give me an idea of, and I know it's not cookie cutter. I get it. You're going to yell at me. There's no cookie cutter approach, right? But just give me like an idea of like, okay, and maybe the better question is, what are the things we should all avoid in the chronic Lyme community? That's probably a better question. What are the things that are no-nos for all of us?
Of course. Listen, for myself, for the majority of people that I work with, it is that paleo lifestyle, right? So it's no sugar, no dairy, no grains. They're inflammatory. And then eating inflammatory foods when you are someone with Lyme, with autoimmune, the inflammation is up in our body and we're already fighting. So keeping it at bay, to me, and again, I work with so many people that have such great results that I really do try to encourage a paleo lifestyle. But there are people that are vegan and they don't want to eat meat. And I get it because I was that way for 16 years. And if you can feel well and be vegan or be vegetarian or whatever the diet is that you're doing, if you feel well, then do that. But if you don't feel well, because I didn't, and I didn't eat meat, I encourage you to just try it for 2 weeks and see if you feel better. And if you feel better, keep going. I always say to people, it's like the way you feel will motivate you to keep going. So if you don't feel well, and granted, some people it might take 4 weeks, but I swear by like 2 weeks, you will start to feel a significant difference. You'll start to feel like you have more energy or less brain fog or less stomach issues. I really am a believer in paleo. And so if you are struggling, please, for me, just try it and see how you feel. And if it doesn't make any difference, then don't do it anymore and go back to what you were doing. But if you aren't feeling well and you're looking for something to try that might be slightly different, give it a try, see how you feel, because it really across the board is the number one thing that I really believe helps people not only feel better, but you take the power back, you take your health back into your own hands just through what we're putting in our body.
My final question before Rich picks up to conclude this interview, which I mean, I could keep going with you forever, but it's getting late. Is let's just say, because Rich talked about this is the grocery store diagnosis, right? Your date got you diagnosed. So now you're tomorrow, you're shopping at ShopRite or wherever you shop, but probably not ShopRite, right? Wherever.
ShopRite. I haven't heard ShopRite in so long.
Come on, you're northeastern. There's got to be a ShopRite somewhere near you.
I grew up with ShopRite, but there's not one in the city.
It's true. I bet it's all right. Let's just say you're on Long Island and you're at a ShopRite. And you spark up a conversation with somebody and they're newly diagnosed to Lyme disease. You have a 2-minute window. You really want to give them like a top 3 tips for them to succeed. beyond finding a Lyme litter doctor and following your protocol, what would be 3 things you just tell them, like really quick tips to help them shortcut their journey and things you wish you would have known when you first got diagnosed?
Sorry, I'm going to take
Yep.
everything you just said. Three tips on if you just got diagnosed with Lyme.
Yep. Newly diagnosed to Lyme disease, 3
Okay.
tips that you can give person to person beyond seeking a Lyme literate medical professional.
Oh my gosh. Diet is number 1 for me. It's the first thing that comes out of my mouth every single time. Also, be easy on your body, be gentle, let yourself rest, listen to your body. And again, going back to how the mindfulness piece, how you're talking to yourself. I always recommend Louise Hay's book. I really think it just changed where I was, because I was really deep in a dark little spiral, and it helped me so much. And I think another really big piece is surrounding yourself with supportive people. And listen, if someone does not have chronic illness, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, people don't understand. People do not understand chronic illness unless they've been through it. So we have to give people a little bit of grace, that not everyone's going to understand what it means to be chronically ill, but finding the most supportive people you can, that maybe they don't completely understand, but they can listen and they can kind of hold that space for you to share what you're going through, and just be a good friend or a good family member. And if there are people in your life that aren't supportive or don't believe you, or you feel like are gaslighting you, it's time to say goodbye to those people for now. Maybe we can revisit when we're feeling better, but surround yourself with people that are loving and supportive. And really, most importantly, of course, it all just comes back to loving and taking care of yourself.
So Kim, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming back to the mindset piece, because Matt was touching on everything other than the mindset piece, but you finally brought it back despite Matt's, limitations of Matt's interview. So thank you for doing that. And one of the things I wanted to share with you, Kim, is Matt and I have been developing frameworks to try to help people to have sort of shortcuts in their minds when going through this healing journey. And I have to tell you, the way you describe this, despite again all of Matt's limitations in this question, was really perfect for the observations we've been making over the last 5 years. We've actually created this acronym called PARM, and Matt and I, as Italian American,
sounds yummy.
Always going to bring everything to Parmesan, right? And
by the way, so you can still make a great paleo chicken parm, because it is my favorite meal.
All
you
right.
just use almond flour. So just to bring it back to parm as a chicken parm lover.
All right, there you go. So we have paleo parm.
Exactly.
So
and you can have cassava flour pasta on the side.
All right. So and our PARM is an acronym for prehabilitate, assist, rehabilitate, and then maintain. And I'll tell you, your healing journey really flowed exactly with that framework, where you went through this process of prehabilitating, right? Before you went through this kill phase of assisting your body to reduce the microbes, you went through this process of getting your mindset in place and learning about the brain and learning about how your feelings, how your thoughts are automatic, how your feelings are automatic, how your actions are automatic, and how you have to rewire your brain in order to be able to have these thoughts, feelings, and actions to serve you. You went through this process of changing your diet. You moved to a paleo diet so that your diet would serve you. You changed the way you moved. You went from being a rigorous triathlete doing a lot of cardio to now having a more gentle form of movement, but understanding how important that was for your detox and for your mindset. What I didn't hear anything about, so I do want to ask you about this, because we hear a lot about sleep and the importance of sleep. So what did you do, if anything, to make sure that you were getting the sleep you needed And we understand that sleep is important, not only from the standpoint of having the rest and the energy that you need, but also for brain detox.
Yeah, I sleep, I, I need it. So I will have no shame in getting the sleep that I need. So that's number one. But one thing that's really helped me with my sleep, it's called an Apollo Neuro. It's a wearable device. And so, and it's, helps drop you into your parasympathetic nervous system to get you out of a fight or flight. I sleep with that every night. There's a setting on it for sleep, and now it's called Smart Vibes. But it basically resets itself in the middle of the night to also help you stay asleep. And if you wake up, it can kind of like ease you back into sleep. That's been a game changer for me with sleep. I also love, I will wear it in the morning. I switch it to the good morning settings. It's a nice way to like easily wake up. And also there's a focus setting on it that I absolutely love. And when I during the day really need to get some tasks taken care of, or if I have to pack a suitcase, you bet my Apollo is on and I have it on the focus setting. But I really love it for sleep. It's really been a game changer for me. So that is kind of my big sleep secret. I would love to say that I have a better consistency in my routine. I try to go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time, but I struggle with that one. And but certainly for me, I am an 8 to 9 hour human. I need that sleep. And also, we're now learning that as women, we do need 8 to 9 hours of sleep. And all the studies on sleep were on men. And so women require more sleep than men. So again, granted, I do not have children. So I think my ability to sleep is a little bit easier than others, but really taking my sleep seriously and getting the hours that I need.
So Kim, what you shared with Matt was you went through this whole process of learning about your body and learning about your brain and building this toolbox for yourself, which is actually what Ali Hilfinger talked about in her book, Bite Me, right? Where she said you have to build your toolbox, your individual toolbox. Each one of us is different. Each one of us had different microbes fit into us. Every one of us has our own unique microbiome, and we have to learn how to build the tools, which you did beautifully. I mean, you described it beautifully and powerfully, and now you have your toolbox built, right? Now you went through the process of assisting your body with killing off microbes. Maybe antibiotics a little bit too long, but it was certainly a part of it. And then you have to have a more diverse set of tools available to you to help you through that process. And you were detoxing and learning how to properly detox, because you certainly have to, you have to up your detox game when you go into the process of killing off all those bugs, right? And making sure that you now get to this rehabilitation phase that you went through, where because you had used all of the antibiotics and because you went through this kill, your microbiome was changed and you were dealing with various issues like SIBO, and you did go through a process of rehabilitating your body. You were talking to us about, or you're talking to Matt about meditation, which is a really, really powerful tool to help you, again, to reorganize your brain and calm your brain. And what you were also learning how to do is how to prevent your body from being triggered into fight or flight, so that immunosuppression would not take place. You were learning how to self-soothe, and you were, again, building this toolbox and building this toolbox and building the toolbox. And now you've gotten to the place where you understand that there's no curing anything. There's no curing Lyme, and the goal should not be to kill everything. The goal should be to get your body back into balance, and you got your body into balance. You became a more balanced person, rather than using the word health. I like to use the word balance. You're in balance, and then you decided to go on vacation, and you know what? And you decided you were going to do some things that weren't necessarily going to be consistent with good maintenance, but you knew that you could do those things. You didn't have to live the Spartan life. You could enjoy the experiences of being a European and eating, by the way, cleaner versions of cheese and meats and the other things that you were doing. But you got to the point where, because you're now in touch with your body, because you understand that you were getting out of balance, you brought all those tools with you that you had gained during your prehab phase, during your assistance and killing phases, during the rehabilitation phase. And now what you're able to do is now take the tools out of the toolbox, get yourself back in balance, and now you're feeling good again, right? So
Yeah.
I think this is a beautiful podcast. I really love this. I wish I was participating more in that piece of it than Matt, but and I'm teasing, of course. It was
Matt,
really a beautiful
he's
podcast.
really
I
taking
mean,
some
I
hits.
did way better, Rich. I generally don't interrupt on Rich's part here, Kim. We generally we divide and conquer. I speak, then Rich. I'm sorry, Rich, then me, then Rich. But I had to jump in because I have zero regrets because I know I did it better. So I'm just saying.
What I want to share with you, Kim, and you know, I'm going to share with the people who are listening to this now is I'm going to refer everybody to this podcast, right? Because I think you've really beautifully outlined the process that you went through, and you taught it in a way that's so broadly described that everyone can go through these same 4 steps in the way that you did. And so long as their goal is to bring themselves into balance, so long as they are going to, you know, show themselves grace, as long as they understand that what they're doing is they're building their toolbox so they can get to the point where they now have this balanced life. And if they want to take a step away from being as perfect as you are most of the time and have a European vacation or do something else like that, you can do that and not be afraid that you're going to have a relapse. You're going to only walk it up to the point where you're a little off, and then you bring it back with the tools that you develop. So give me your thoughts on my perspective on how you worked within that framework.
Oh my gosh, I've got to summarize all of that. I think, you know, it's funny because I do one of the other things, and I like to say where I am is this like kind of maintenance phase, right? Where like I do feel really good the majority of the time, and I do have these moments where I don't. And again, going back to knowing how to getting back on track, I know it so well. It's in my bones at this point. And it also allows me to listen. We're human, and so I like to say that 98% of the time I am strict paleo. And so when I'm not on a European vacation, I really went for it this summer. I don't know. Yeah, I was like, I'm in Europe.
That is so cool.
And by the way, I was feeling great. So I was like, I'm going for it. And then it caught up with me. And I really went for it too many days in a row. But in normal life, in the city, and when I'm traveling, I can from time to time go out for sushi and eat the rice, you know, or have a gluten-free pasta. I will not mess with regular pasta, but gluten-free pasta, you know, from time to time I will have. So it's not like I'm living this crazy rigid life. But from time to time, I will enjoy and indulge. And I'm out with friends, like, sure, I will have, you know, something. But for the most part, I also know how to order when I'm out to eat that still stays in that paleo framework. And again, giving myself grace. If I did have a gluten-free pasta out at night, like knowing I enjoyed it and enjoying it while I'm having it. But I also know that the next morning I'm back. I'm back to my, you know, my paleo, my scrambled eggs, and you know, or a shake, and I'm back on track. And then that way it doesn't actually catch up with me like it did when I was in Europe. But yeah, so I think it's giving yourself grace, and I do think that you can get to this place, and it's just learning what works for you and staying consistent. Consistency is key. And I also think, I know that we threw so much out there of like all the things I did, and paleo and FODMAP and the Candida diet, and it can feel overwhelming, and I know it can because it felt that way to me. And I think just, you know, taking it truly one day at a time, and knowing that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and that you will get there. And again, finding, even if it's just one person that is a great listener, to have that support system is key. And I think that, you know, it's a process and it's a journey, but I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change everything I went through, because it changed my life. And yes, it was really hard for a really long time, but it made me who I am now. And I like this version of me better. I'm nicer to myself. I love myself more than I ever have. I feel like I've been able to help other people through what I went through. And so I think if you can just, you know, start that daily gratitude and start to look at, you know, again, like it's not happening to you, it's happening for you, and start to ask. Like I would literally ask, like, show me what this means. Like, show me, you know, what I can do. And I think it really changes things, and truly giving it over, and no matter what religion or belief system you have, you know, finding a connection with a higher power and knowing that you are taken care of and you're supportive is key.
So let's deal with one more thing, Kim, because although you are one of the most emotionally healthy people we've ever interviewed, and I've really
Wow.
enjoyed the way you
Thank you. I hit it
articulated
really well, didn't I?
the
No, I'm just kidding.
the way you described going from being unhealthy to being healthy with the book that you read, which helped you to now go through this process of identifying your false beliefs and then reframing generally your belief patterns so that you would understand that this was all happening for you and not to you, and that there was a purpose for this, and your purpose was going to be revealed, even though so many people in your life knew that purpose existed, told you the purpose existed, but you resisted it, but you got
I did.
all those false beliefs. But there was one false belief that you did raise with Matt that I do want to visit with you.
Yeah.
And that is you said that you started feeling badly about not looking perfect or not being the picture of health when you had that issue where you were dealing with the endometriosis and then, you know, some of those health challenges. And I want to argue to you that that is the final false belief that I hope you can shatter, because I think what's beautiful about you is that you are the picture of balance, and you understand what balance
Thank
is,
you.
and you understand that you don't have to kill all of the Lyme. You just have to bring your body in balance and manage that part of your microbiome. And you've done that, and you've done that so beautifully that I don't think anybody has ever given us a better map to healing than you have in the 500 episodes that we've done. And
Wow.
please break that false belief that you need to be something other than what you are, which is a beautifully balanced young woman.
Thank you. You're gonna make me cry again. Um, thank you. That is very kind of you to say. And you know, I, I will say I do have a great therapist. That's another thing in my toolkit that is extremely helpful and something I'm working on, right? I feel like we're like always a work in progress, and there's always ways to continue to learn and grow and do better. And so, and I'm on that journey because there's, to me, there's always more to learn, and there's always places to grow. And I certainly have and again, like we could go, I mean, this conversation could take so many things, but you know, we can go all the way back to childhood and looking at
Well, it
how you were
does.
brought up and your parents and all the things. And again, that creates a lot of those internal thoughts.
False
And
beliefs. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And
And
I have that from my
no, but we
childhood.
all do, Kim, because
Right.
the way our brain forms is that
Yeah.
during the first 25 years of our lives, we are having all these neural pathways and these neural connections being created, and many of those false beliefs are the result of either our brain misinterpreting experiences or our brain, you know, developing these pathways so that we can get through some of the challenges that, you know, that it's interpreting. So sure, that's all a
Yeah.
part of it, but in the end, I think what's again has been beautiful about the journey that you've shared with our listeners is that you went from being very sick and toxic to being detoxified and balanced. And with the exception of that last false belief that we broke together,
Exactly.
yeah, you're in a place where you can live a very healthy life, and we want this to be an inspiration for people who are at the early stage of this journey, where they don't think they can get better, and they don't think they, that they can live another day, when in fact, they can live full lives so long as they are understanding how their brain works, understanding how important mindset is, understanding, these different steps that they can take to ultimately get better. And then, just like you, go on a European vacation.
I love that ending for all of us.
So Kim, thank you so much for taking a couple of hours out of your life to spend
Thank
time
you.
with one cranky old guy and
No.
and Matt from Long Island. And
Oh my gosh.
please stay in touch with us. Let us know if
I
there's
will.
anything that you're working on that we can share with the community. You have an awesome business, and
Thank
we'd really
you.
love to encourage more of our folks to work with you. So please use our platform as your platform, and let us know when you have new things you can offer to the community, so we can help to promote that to our folks.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure, and you two together are comical. So thank you, Matt. I'm happy you chimed in at the end. I really am.